Hi, folks. Welcome to Let's Talk It Over. I'm Ken Ween. With me today, my wonderful co-host, Monica Brinkman, and our guest, Lillian Brummet. And Lillian it's funny because she and her husband, David, are very much like Monica and myself. But they're up in Canada, just north of the Idaho border, by the way, which is a beautiful part of Canada. I've driven through there.
Yes.
Years ago, and it's just a wonderful part of the world. Anyway, rather than reminisce about a trip years ago, the thing that makes us alike is they are artists, writers, they write poetry. David is a drummer. I love drumming, and if I had been allowed, that's what I would have done as a kid instead of learning to play a clarinet, which I never enjoyed. I always liked the rhythm. And of course, Monica is also an artist, a painter. My wife is a painter. I'm a writer. Monica's a writer. So
I play piano.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
We have this simpatico kind of thing.
We do.
Yeah, with Lillian and David. And so, and as you might notice, behind Lillian on the floor, there were a couple of dogs. Mm-hmm. So again, something that we all have in common, our love of animals. So today we're going to be talking about Lillian and her husband, what the things they do. And we're going to add at the bottom, as we always do, at the show description, we're going to have some links for you where you can go and look at their books, look at their blogs, find out if you happen to live in that part of Canada or northern Idaho. You might even want to contact David to take some drum lessons or to help you repair your drums, or maybe to figure out how to build a drum. All kinds of things. And so, Lillian, with that introduction, why don't you start us off and let's talk a bit. Let's talk it over.
Oh, well, I'm so excited about the music connection with the two of you, Monica, with your playing piano and you with your playing clarinet. I think that is so cool. As you can see, actually, in the background there's a couple of drums on our little condenser by the window, and Dave's in the process of reheading them. So they're just curing right now, and then he'll do the roping later. Yeah, he's always busy doing things like that. We have drums shipped all the way from Florida sometimes up to here to get repaired. So it's quite the reach that we have, and it's really interesting. It's a type of skill that not too many people have. So It's neat that he has his own niche in that regard. So he can take, like, say, an ancient drum that's falling apart, literally falling apart. The staves are coming apart and everything. He can put it completely back together. He can, he has connections who can make him parts if he can't find them, like in regards to hardware and things like that. And he can make a drum that's would have been heading to the landfill, a whole new thing. So that's a true passion of his, keep them out of the landfill and get the music happening in our households. And so, he's really passionate about that. We also have the drum studio, of course, in the lower half of our home. And it takes the entire lower half of our home, believe me. If you go online and see some of the pictures, you'll see why. He's got like 2 drum kits and 2 percussion areas set up for various things, and then an open area for his 2 desks and all the different things that he does down there. He has a workshop as well. We converted an extra part of our garage built onto it, so he has an extra workshop there. He built his own drum table, things like that. Mm-hmm.
What part of the house do you get?
Well, I get to share. The drums often leak up here, actually. When it gets too busy down there, we'll end up having drums up here too. I share in all of this. So whatever Dave is doing, we're partnership. Even though he might be in the music side of things, he's the face people see. But I'm behind the scenes. So I'm taking the appointments, I'm running the office, I'm doing the taxes, I'm cleaning the rooms in between the clients coming in and out. If he has like back-to-back appointments, I'm greeting them at the door and staying with them in the waiting room until the changeover happens and answering their questions and, the communications behind the scenes. That's all me. Most of the online stuff is me. So
it's important.
Yes. And when it comes to the writing, it's vice versa. So I'm usually the person that's in the media when it comes to writing. Dave's usually the person that does the in-person events because he's very comfortable, being a musician. He's very comfortable being in front of people and talking to people and being his charming self. I'm very shy, and when I get into a group of people, I just I shut down and I get all scared, nervous, and I don't do very well. My sentences don't make sense, so he jumps in and he's the face for everyone in that regard. So we have our different specialties and we sort of meet in the middle. Like our writing too, I might do most of the research and the organizing part of it, and I'll do a lot of the transcribing into draft manuscript form. But he's also a huge part of the creative process, what's going into the book, doing a lot of the writing as well. He does the proofing, he does most of the editing, the first and second draft editing before it goes to the prose. He does a lot of our cover designs, our ad creations, our trailers, all of that. Okay. So we balance each other out.
I hope you're working on a book about marriage.
What about the marriage part? Yeah, is there time for that?
No, you work together so much.
Part of it.
It sounds to me like you've got maybe an interesting book there to write too.
Yeah, working with your spouse can be an incredible challenge. We're lucky enough to be in the position where our business is doing well enough that one of us can be at home full time, and he works the day job with the benefits. So he which covers our dental and other things. In Canada, where our medical's covered, but dental, eyewear, those kinds of things are covered through his job, which is important, and also to have that steady income coming in because of the ebb and flow of working a small business. One week you might be getting really good book sales, and next week you might not see anything coming in. The week after that you get a shipment of 5 drums to get repaired, or it's very sporadic, and so you have to really have that steady income coming in, we found. So he's able to work on the weekends and on the weekday evenings, and I'm like the full-timer, 24/7, because the office never goes away. So what we do for that is we actually schedule time off. We actually say, okay, these days, no bookings, no phone calls, no, the computer is turned off. Our phones are turned off for the most part. We just turn everything off. We stay away from the office. We try not to talk about the business, which is really difficult for me in particular, being like the organizer behind the scenes. So, but I really try to, during that time, we don't talk about the business and we just enjoy our life. We have a beautiful deck. We have a beautiful piece of property. We turned it over from this abused rental lot into this beautiful garden, food producing garden. And so we like to spend time in that. We have a couple different sitting areas and a deck, and that's where we kind of get our off time.
You gave me a great segue. Actually, I wanted to talk about your books, but Monica, I think you had a question, didn't you?
What is your latest book release?
The very latest one is the cookbook, which we were talking about behind the scenes. I'm so excited about. I'm excited about every book we write and every new release.
Recipes, are they vegan, or are they healthy, or are they just a combination of different recipes?
It's a combination. We don't consider a specific genre of cooking, like vegan or vegetarian or paleo or any of these fads that are out there.
Yes.
What we have instead is a really nice balance. Most of the recipes are meatless. The ones that do have meat in them are low meat. So, and you can always substitute. We always make sure that at the end of every recipe there are a wide array of variations, because we want you to experiment in your kitchen. We want you to use what is in season right now and also what you have in your fridge. So if we know that this can be substituted easily for that, we make sure that that is in on each recipe.
Since you are doing a lot of gardening, it must be very seasonally driven too.
It is absolutely seasonally driven. Yes, thank you for that. One of the reasons why we put out this book was because we wanted to encourage people to not only consider gardening, because you can garden anywhere. If you have a balcony, you can garden. If you have a wall in your home, you can get one of those little grow units and you can grow certain things there. There's all different ways that you can grow, even with very limited space along your fence. You can put things. You can grow vertically. Like if you have a deck and you want to give yourself shade, grow
Yep.
some cucumbers up a vine there, and you're feeding your neighborhood with cucumbers for the summer. I'm telling you, those things are prolific, right? So
Yep.
we really can garden anywhere, and I really encourage people to do that. Flowers, of course, too. We want to do that as well, but we can always grow food for ourselves. But part of that is also, for those who aren't able to grow for themselves, there's this huge growing movement of the buy local. People are really understanding the impact of their diet, what it has on the environment, for free trade, all kinds of other issues, poverty, all kinds of issues. And so the more local that we can base our menu plan on, the better. And so by purchasing from retailers who support local producers, or by going to your farmers markets and so forth, direct to Farmers Gate, and then bringing home all that produce. So in season, you're getting it in peak harvest, and not only that, but it's at peak nutrition level. So the longer something has been harvested and shipped and repackaged and shipped and moved to another warehouse, every day, every moment, it's losing nutrients. So
I have to put in a little caveat here, folks. Really important. If you go to shop at a farmer's market, ask the person selling you where it was grown. Are they the actual farmer? Because very often in farmers markets, what you're actually getting is commercially grown that is now being sold off, like they're a retailer. And
those are often
you want real stuff. You want real local.
You want it grown locally. There are a few outlets that are like that locally. In order to keep a continual supply on their shelves, they're part of like a BC co-op. And so they get food from maybe Vancouver or maybe Prince George up north, but it's all being sold down here in our farmers market. So yes, it's traveled quite a ways, maybe longer than we would want, but for the most part, usually they're based in a regional, like a co-op that they're a part of. Not always, like you say, in some of the really larger centers, big cities and stuff like that, you're looking at maybe a different thing there. That's absolutely true. But by
our local markets, that there were quite a few that were selling items grown somewhere else, having them shipped.
It depends where you are. Where you are, Lillian, you're in a relatively rural area. It's not likely you're going to have a big company involved in that. In Phoenix, where I used to live, it was very common because there were corporations that were bringing food into town. Okay, now we have excess. What are we going to do? Okay, we're going to get on Saturdays and Sundays, we're going to get these people, sell it to the middle, and they can then sell it on. Okay, now you are not only into fresh food and good food, you're also into trash. So let's talk trash. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't mean trash talking. I mean, you and David have a couple books out, right, about trash. And we were talking earlier about the drums, and you were talking about, rather than having an old drum land up in the landfill, better to have somebody like David who knows how, and there are very few who know how, repair it. And, it's very interesting. Actually, the other day I was watching an episode of The Crown, and Philip, who of course was married to Queen Elizabeth, got into four-in-hand racing. That's coach racing. You're driving a coach. And he found this old coach that had belonged to this family and restored it for them. Nice. And it was beautiful and all. I have to say, I cannot imagine not being able to do that on my income. I mean, when you're the husband of the Queen of England, you would have more money and more people. But you have these two books out. One is called Trash Talk, and the second one is called Trash Talk Book 2, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, it's a 2-book series. It actually started out back in like 98, I think, as a column, and it got syndicated internationally. So it was published like France and England and a place in Africa and all over the US and quite a few magazines in Canada and a few smaller publications in Canada as well. Even one of these Russian culture type magazines picked it up and they were running it. So it got picked up in a lot of different types of magazines and publications. And that ran for about 6 years. And then I ended up publishing it into its first edition. And that was, I think, in 2004. So in 2012, it evolved. It became a 2-book series. Mm-hmm. Now, the reason why we did that is the first book walks you through the more easier things to do, the things that aren't too terribly challenging. The second book takes you into a little bit more challenging, like let's get into composting. Let's look at how we're using our water. Let's look at how we can reduce energy around our home by doing really simple, small things. So an example from book 2, two examples. So one's going to actually involve you doing something and one is going to actually involve you changing your habits. So you're going to your tap and you're going to wash your hands or you're going to wash something. And so you turn on your hot water. Typically, we turn it to the hot water, we wash our hands, and by the time the tap is getting warm, we're turning it off. Mm-hmm. So all we've actually done is warm up our pipes. We haven't actually used that hot water, and that hot water is sitting in our pipes now, useless. So instead of doing that, do we really need to turn on the hot water tap? Just a simple thing. Another thing to reconsider is all the exterior walls of your home have these outlets. So it might be your plug-in outlet, it might be a light switch, it might be a telephone or a cable plug-in, right? And they got those little plastic covers, or right. So get a flathead screw, take off that cover, and get those little foam inserts. They come in a package of like 6 to 12, and sometimes you can get them in bulk amounts, like several packages for a smaller price. And you just insert, they're pre-cut out for whatever type of plug you have. And you just put them in place and put the cover back on, put your 1 or 2 screws back in. Super simple. Takes you like maybe a minute per plug, right? And you can actually save up to 15% of your annual energy costs by doing that one thing. Because there's a lot of, and we're talking especially the older homes here, there's a lot of homes out there that, haven't been recently built. And so those holes they're just total power leaks. And if you had one of those guns to run around and see where your energy levels are, your heat levels are, those shine up so bright, those areas. And by covering that, it muffles that. They don't show up as much. So you really do save an incredible amount of energy by doing these really tiny things. So we show you how to do that. Book 1 is more about looking into reconsidering your power as a consumer. How are you spending your money? Are you communicating how you're feeling about the product to the manufacturer? The emails, the communications, the texts that you send them have a huge impact on their decisions. The money that you spend, every penny that you spend, and where you spend it and how you spend it has a huge impact as to the future of our planet and our society. And so we're voting. Every penny that we're spending, we're voting. And so I find that is something we can currently do. It goes into can we maybe rent? Can we barter with our neighbors? Instead of buying a machine or buying a brand new saw and we only need it for this one project, once or twice a year, do we really need to buy the machine? Can we not rent it? Can we not work with a local business that happens to have that type of saw or whatever and say to them, can you make these cuts for me? And pay them for it instead of actually owning these items and all the packaging and then store them and maintain them for what? All of this expense, right? So we can reconsider as consumers. And then that goes much deeper. It goes into let's look at reuse, let's look at repurpose, let's look at reduce. And then it also explains the recycling. So it takes every item that is commonly thrown into your trash bin in your home or your office. It lists them alphabetically, and it goes through all of those different R's. I think there's about 8 different R's. Goes through all of those different R's and explains each one, all the different options. And it also explains the recycling industry for that product. What happens when you take your bottles in, or, how much energy is saved by recycling 3 tin cans. Actually, it's enough to power a light bulb for 4 hours.
I can understand why this got syndicated, and I can understand why it's out in the book. And of course, we want to have a link to your books.
Great.
Where people in the description where they can get. And there is a couple books of your poetry.
Yes.
2 books about trash.
Yes.
And then there's the cookbook.
Yes. And then there's also the Purple Snowflake Marketing book. That is for writers. It helps them understand like the entrepreneurship of being a writer and, rolling up your sleeves and getting very proactive about, managing your action plan, your succession plan, your contingency plan, your marketing plan. Is your marketing plan lasting for the life of that book, including new editions, new contracts with different publishers, new formats? Each one is going to have its own marketing plan. So it walks you through step by step how to go about doing that and how to do so the most effectively with a small budget. Most of us aren't working with, $30,000 for a book launch for 3 months. The big authors, that's what they're spending. We don't. Us people, we don't have that. We have to, do a lot of this on our own, and it shows you how to do that.
These blogs, and why we do these podcasts.
Right.
We're hoping, of course, that our listeners will go to and then we will be doing more things where I'm involved with you, and Monica, maybe you'll be involved too. And as we do these things, maybe your listeners and readers will find out about us. And that is a big part of how the world actually should work. I think that one of the things that you and David really typify and personify is this idea of cooperative energy, and consciousness, which of course I wanted to just mention. You have a blog about consciousness.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, the networking actually segues into the blog quite a lot. The blog is one of the major tools that I use for networking. So my blog, we have 2 blogs, but the Brummet's Conscious blog has gained such a large audience. Like our very lowest month these days is around 5,000 views. Our highest month, which was February 2021, was 430,000 views, which was the largest that we ever had.
Wow.
So we have an audience there. And so we utilize that. We share that spotlight in a variety of different ways. So we invite people like yourself to come in. Let's do an interview about your podcast. How do the 2 of you co-manage the podcast? Or maybe you run a blog, and let's have you come in and give some behind the scenes about your blog. And at the same time, the person that we're speaking to gets a plug and get their bio and their links and stuff in there. And it opens up a door for us to collaborate. So now they might have us as a guest on their blog. Maybe they'll mention that we do the Just for Writers on the 15th of every month, offering, resources for writers for free. And they might, tell their audience about that. You never know how the collaboration might happen. Maybe you're going to run a sale on the same day. Maybe you're going to do book signings together. Maybe you're going to collaborate on some online event. There's all kinds of ways of collaborating, and I love nurturing those relationships. Like I have relationships going back. Well, Monica, you've been networking with me for how long now? A decade? And it goes back. Yeah, we could go back long ways with our networking contact.
Let me just point out, folks, because hopefully among our listeners are writers, people, musicians, people who are whatever. You just were invited by this very, very nice lady, Lillian Brummet, to get involved with her, contact her, and of course, if you go to the website that again Monica is going to put the links in, you'll find that there's a contact link. And of course, you're also on Facebook, right?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, we're on most of the social networking sites out there. Yeah. And if we're not on it, we'll probably be on them soon. Like TikTok, I'm not on yet, but I'll be on that. And Instagram, I don't use as much as I should, but I'm on most of them. Yes.
I noticed in one thing I was reading today that you had started out on MySpace or something.
Boy, yeah, I loved MySpace.
Way back when, right, Monica?
Yeah.
When MySpace was the place to be.
It was a hot spot.
It was, yeah. Yeah, that's where I started out. That's where the blog started, actually.
Yeah.
I think it started there in, 2004, 2003, something like that.
Yeah.
Moved over to the Blogspot platform back in 2008, and I've been there ever since. It's a nice, comfortable place for me. I know it well,
Well, I'm so happy you wrote some poetry.
Can we talk a little bit about poetry?
Oh,
I'd love
we're
to.
thinking alike.
I would love to. Yeah, we have a 2-book series called Playing in the Sandbox of Words. I chose that title because like music and writing, most of the creative arts are helping us break away from being an adult, and it opens us up to, that take off the tie and put on your slippers and get comfortable and get creative. It takes that restraint away from you, and it opens your mind, and you're all of a sudden, for me, getting involved with poetry is playing in the sandbox of words. I love experimenting with the rhythms and the different styles of poetry, and
There's so many
the
too.
power that just a phrase could have with someone. It can stick with them for the longest time because those few words, and it's such an amazing thing. Yeah, I love it.
I do too.
At the end of the show, I'm not sure, Lillian is going to send us something for Monica to add on the end. I don't know if it's going to be a poem, a drum solo, or what. Who knows? That's what
It'll be both.
I'm going to be waiting to find out too. I hope you are. In the meantime, please click on those links, and do be aware that these wonderful people up there in Canada, Dave and Lillian Brummet, and their resources, they're worth paying attention to. They're people who live with consciousness, awareness, and clearly they're pretty good at being married too.
I think they have lots of love combined in that also.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. But it's also, really allowing each other to be the person that they are. So, whether you're a spouse or whether, you're simply a coworker, you have to understand what their rhythm is, what their flow is, what their loves, their joys, the things that they really hate doing. Can you help them in some way? Are they really struggling with what's on their plate right now? And even though that's frustrating you because it's holding you up, maybe we can be a little more compassionate for them and see how we might be able to support them or encourage them or cheerlead them in some way. And I think that this takes a lot of the pressure away from a person feeling judged and pressured by their coworkers or their spouse, and rather turning it into a more friendly sort of collaborative thing, relaxing a little bit. So you didn't meet your deadline and your action plan, it's okay if takes you a little bit longer. The main thing is that you're making headway every day. You're heading in the right direction. You're making forward movement every day, and you're doing so in a positive, collaborative, effective way. It's good. It's all good, so sometimes we have to just relax, and it's okay to have that long to-do list. And it's great to refer to it, but don't let it become your pressure zone. You got what you got in front of you. When your schedule opens up, you choose off that list what you can do next, and look at it more like as, oh, this is my list of opportunities to follow up on, as opposed to, oh my God, I have all of this to do. So it changes our mindset.
I have to have this conversation with my wife so she can understand my rhythm. Which is often my rhythm has got more to do with snoring.
The snoring rhythm.
I think that is very much a secret of life, is that it's very interesting in a way, as the oldest person in this conversation, and I grew up going to school with what I call sewing machine desks. They were fixed in the place, and everybody had to, you sat in rows, and everybody had to be doing the same thing at the same time, because we were all being prepared to work in the factory, as it were. And now we live in a world that is so much more willing to accept that each of us has his own or her own talents, each of us has their own skills. Each of us has their own rhythms. And I think, Lillian, that's a wonderful reminder to us that
Yes.
respecting that difference and being able to tune into that sense of rhythm is so important. And who better to remind us of that than the wife of somebody who plays percussion? Which brings us right back around to the beginning of the conversation, isn't it?
And boy, does he play percussion. I mean, nothing. There hasn't been a thing in this house that hasn't been played on. You know, the door frame, the spoons, the fridge, you know, everything's been played on. What does this sound like?
I actually, you can't see it in the video, but I actually have, maybe 4 feet from me, in my office, a drum.
Oh, fantastic.
That I can play on, and I use it a lot when I'm writing. I'll just sort of tap rhythm to get the rhythm of the words I want.
Right. Right. That absolutely makes sense. It opens up those channels in your brain. It really does, doing something like that. Also, by doing something rhythmically, whether it's being in your garden, you know, doing something in your garden where you're doing something mundane, or whether it's something like musically, especially if it's non-lyrical, if you're just jamming, like say on a drum, it absolutely opens up those channels, and it will help you. It helps me. All of a sudden, I'll just, you know, I'll come running in the house with my hands covered in mud because, you know, bang, I've got the idea. I know exactly what I want to do and how I want to say it. Like, it just opens them up, and it really helps your brain function in the way you want it to.
Opens the pores of your soul.
Right. Makes those synapses snap, right?
Hey, Lillian, it's been just wonderful talking to you.
You both as well.
Folks, please use those links and follow up. And Lillian and Dave's poetry, the trash talk, the recipes, and their advice if you are into marketing and you're trying to market product, yes, books, but also other things, you know. It's very important to think about that. And most importantly, there are 2 things I'd like people to take away from this conversation. One is try to be conscious. Think about your life, the world around you. And I think that's something Lillian and Dave, but Lillian does very well. The other is be aware of the rhythm of life. And try to give yourself the enhanced quality of life that comes from trying to merge into so many rhythms. It doesn't all have to be the same tempo.
I don't think we'd be bored if it all was.
Absolutely. So,
absolutely.
Thank you again for joining us, and let's talk it over.
Thank you, Ken, Monica. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great seeing you, Lillian. And folks, be sure and check out the sites. Lillian's a wonderful person. She's helped many people, as has her husband. So, folks, a little surprise for all of us, but here you go. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Trying to experience the 100-mile diet has become a lot more achievable. From One Small Garden, an exciting new compilation of recipes based on local, fresh, in-season foods. Creston, BC writers Dave and Lillian Brummet have produced a recipe book that teaches how to deliciously make use of fresh fruits and vegetables from backyard gardens to farmers markets, the freshest, purest source of food we can draw from. Love international foods but can't afford the expensive restaurants? Now you can cook better at home without the big cost. From One Small Garden, over 300 nutritious recipes with a delicious twist.
Wings on a breeze. I dream of feathers, ruffled and rippling by the force of the wind. Sounds like laundry on a line, being swept by a brisk breeze. I'm alive, and I lament a life of bitter resentment. The terrible need for approval, now faded with her death, leaves this mind weighted down by thoughts of sacrifice and loss. I regret that childhood dared me the strength to support, while circumstances struck and struck and struck again. She no longer fights the wind to stay afloat and fly to that special castle in the sky Today she soars without bruised wings, nor battered body to hinder her, while I, now in midlife, I who never knew wings, have sprouted a pair, so small, so awkward. Will they enable me to fly one day and try my own flight into the wind? In Our Midst. This next poem is excerpted from the book Rhythm and Rhyme by Dave and Lillian Brummet. This poem speaks of my passion to view every moment as a chance to leave a positive legacy. It is called In Our Midst. How can we justify this life with every breath that we take? Can we influence this hard world? Is there power in the hands of this boy or this girl? There are heroes in our midst, and you know that they exist. They exist in you and I. We are the heroes in our midst. How can we waste away this life when every breath is a gift, a chance to choose whatever fits to make some wrong right or ease somebody's plight? How can we whine about this life when those who passed before had passed through rougher roads and more? And when looked at in this light, the roads we travel are golden evermore. There's heroes in our midst, and you know that they exist. They exist in you and I. We are the heroes in our midst. How can we claim we are conscious when each breath releases anger or some rotting hate within? And are we making changes for the world we're living in? There are heroes in our midst, and you know that they exist. They exist in you, they exist in I. We are the heroes in our midst.